Welcome to the first clinical workshop of the season. And if you are new here, I'll give you a little rundown. I'm Dr. Jody Carrington. I'm a clinical psychologist. And once a month, we do a clinical workshop around here. And I have been watching the chat. And okay, so a couple of disclaimers before we get started. This is, I might swear. So if you have little ears in your world, that might be a problem, or if that offends you in any way, I'm sorry. Not really. So mostly because I'm going to talk a lot about all the things today, but anxiety is a big deal. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the latest research. I'm going to quote a little bit from one of my favorite books on this topic these days, this fella. And I'm just, sometimes when I get really on a roll about things, it just goes off in some kind of fucking direction. So just bear with me. Okay, so and I'm seeing your words and your faces, and I think that I just want to make sure you can see me. So I think I'm probably a little bit behind your chats, but I can certainly see you. And if you have questions, do that. Des and Marty are both on. I cannot see any of your faces, but you can see mine. Cool. And just a note, in many of the in the chat, I can see your first name if you put your first name in there. So just sometimes for confidentiality, if you're ever concerned about that, just know that everybody can see your name. So you can change that, I think, in the settings if that's something that you need to. Jane found the link. Good. Brenda's here from Muskoka. Oh my gosh. We've got most of the people from Manitoba here. Brooke from Salt Lake City. You know what? My favorite people these days are in Utah. I got to tell you, I don't understand why so many people in Utah think that a sweary psychologist is awesome, but it feels like a second home these days. Okay, so we're going to South Shore, Nova Scotia. Tanya, you're up late. Grand Prairie. Oh my Jesus. Okay, focus. This, I feel like we're back doing lives where I would get completely derailed and anxious. Good thing tonight we're talking about anxiety and its antics. And listen, I've done a workshop around anxiety a couple of times in probably the year and a half that we've been doing these workshops, but I think it's always a great place to land, particularly at this time, this season, because although we have spent a lot of time with our shoulders up, generally speaking, this season in particular, we have... we see a whole lot more as change happens, as we get back into routine, as our kids get more anxious, as, new educators are stepping in or stepping out or trying to figure out like the navigation of classrooms and all of those things. So, welcome. I'm going to be chatting for 60 minutes. Again, I can see your chat, and then we always save 30 minutes for questions. And so if you have any questions as I'm going, pop them in the chat. Marty will send them over to me. We've only got a couple so far, and then we can go from there. Okay, so welcome. Every time I speak, I say this. I'm coming to you live tonight from Treaty 7 land, which is now known as the central part of the province of Alberta. It was and is home first to the Blackfoot Confederacy, which is made up of the Siksika, the Kainai, the Piikani, the Tsuut'ina First Nation, the Stoney Nakoda First Nation, and the Métis Nation Region 3. It is my privilege always to do this work on this land, to raise my babies here, to try to create a sense of connection in a place where so much disconnection has been experienced. And so I'm glad you're joining us. The disclaimer is always on these workshops that this isn't therapy. Instead, the intent is to provide information about mental health issues that is trauma-informed and relationship-focused. So away we go. Away we go. Now, if I want to talk about just anxiety in particular, I think that, or if we want to define it, I think the thing that so many people talk a lot about, or not enough about, is that we use anxiety so colloquially. Like this, I'm so anxious about this. This is causing me so much anxiety. I've got this kid's anxious, that kid's anxious. And there's a massive difference, of course, between a clinical anxiety disorder and feeling anxiety. And the point tonight for me is just to really normalize an experience of anxiety, which we all have, particularly at times in times of big change, particularly when we're stepping into our wedding, or we've been blindsided by a loss, or a somebody has hurt us to the core, or we sort of something is shaken up in our life. I want you to feel anxiety then. Okay. If you are in a very uncertain situation where you should be scared, right? Anxiety is a part of that. And I think all of those things are what we need to understand primarily is that for sure, that piece of anxiety is normal. So it's protective, it's normal, and it's part of every single one of us. When people just say like, I don't have any anxiety, or this person isn't anxious, we all have it. It is there for good reason. It's there to let us know about danger, or often before we can even cognitively process it, it happens so quick. So I'll tell you, from the primitive perspective, from a neurophysiological perspective, the job of anxiety is to sense things in our environment even before it can get to our thought process, to our prefrontal cortex. So I know if you've been here very long, you know about the lid flip. And if you're new, I'm just going to explain this to you real quick, okay? So if you put your hand up like this, put your thumb in the inside, wrap your fingers around your thumb. That's a hand model of your brain, okay? Now, human beings, you and me, we've developed from the inside out, which means this internal part of our brain, represented here by our thumb, is our limbic system. Okay. And this develops first and foremost. Our brain stems, our limbic system, that develops first. The most primitive parts of our brain live here. Okay. And how we handle anxiety, one of the most primitive emotions, lives in here. What we want to deal with, what we want to develop, the most effective among us, have ways to deal effectively with big emotions, okay? It's called the ability to regulate those emotions. But the 3 emotional regulation strategies that all of us got for free is fight, flight, and freeze. And they live right here in the middle of our brain, in our limbic system, okay? This is a very rudimentary explanation, so just go with me. There's other people that have tried to say we have other F things like fawn and stupid shit like that, but just forget it. It's just fight, flight, and freeze, okay? For the easiness of understanding. What separates humans from most other mammals is we have this prefrontal cortex that wraps around the limbic system, okay? And Dan Siegel talks about this like a lid. Everything you've ever learned in your life lives in that lid, okay? What's so critically important is how to regulate emotion, how to make sense of anxiety, how to calm yourself back down, lives in this prefrontal cortex. And we are not born with the shit that is in here. Somebody has to show us how to regulate emotion. Otherwise, we navigate this world with primarily just fight, flight, and freeze. Okay? Now, all of us have some additional coping strategies. All of us. Some of us tend to be more advanced in this way than others. Okay? How we determine that, of course, is who you've had around you. So, it always comes back to the Ram Dass quote for me: we are all just here walking each other home. So when you bring a baby home from the hospital, they don't have a lot up here to say, I'm tired, I'm hungry, this scares me, grandma's voice is annoying, whatever the deal is. They just flip their lid because there's no way to communicate other than to get distressed. The job of big people is to walk them home. Okay, so you can startle an infant quite easy because a loud noise, a sudden movement flips this lid, because there's not a lot up there that makes sense of like, that's just this, or this is just the dog, or, if a kid becomes really used to, so you grow up in a house full of dogs, for example, the story in your head is that, oh, that's just our puppy. If I bring one of my children into your home and you have lots of dogs, sometimes you'll notice the overwhelmedness of that because they've never seen furry animals running around on 4 legs, right? So they're just like, ah! What the fuck is that? Okay. Normal, because there's not a script for what is happening in that way. Okay. So oftentimes when little kids flip their lids again and again and again and again and again, and I mean, this is such an exhaustive process because there's so many times that we have to sort of walk people home to be able to create neural pathways that allows them to start to be able to use their words, say how they're feeling, name it to tame it, make sense of big emotion. If you do not have a lot of opportunity to get your lid back on by regulated people, if you're surrounded by a lot of people who are like this, super anxious, okay? First time moms. If I even think about me as a first time mom and what I was like with my twins, I think my children experienced motherhood entirely different because I mean, I don't know if you've heard the story before, but we have 3 children and Asher's now 14 and the twins are 11. Okay. So when we brought Asher home, I'd been at the children's hospital for about 5 years. And I knew everything about children. Okay. I was helping people deal with their personal children. How hard could it be to get your own one? I was a disaster. Okay, postpartum through the roof. I was very sure that he had autism twice. I cured it both times in the first week of his life. I literally was sitting in the doctor's office parking lot because I thought he had hydrocephalus at 18 months, which PS is almost impossible, okay? Because his gait was off when he was walking. Asher's experience of me as a mom was very different than by the time I got to children, to twins, okay? To 2-for-1s. Because I don't know if I was so fucking tired or I had a script a little bit more for parenthood that I knew a little bit more about, like, you can't overdose a kid on Benadryl. I'm sure you can, but like I did that with Asher because I thought he was having an allergic reaction and I gave him a whole day's dose of Benadryl and then I had called poison control and then I started to cry at the poison control lady because I thought she was going to call Child and Family Services on me because I gave too much. So when there isn't a lot of people to regulate you, or you have a lot of serotonin floating around in that brain, it tends to flip that lid quite a bit, okay? So you can be a kind of person who has either one or both or those contributing factors of either you're genetically loaded or they either don't happen in isolation or your experiences sort of tee you up to not have a lot of skill to stay regulated in times of distress, okay? Now, you can imagine that when we think about anxiety as being protective, when I am laying there as an infant and I see a dog running around, right? And I've never seen a dog before as a 6-month-old baby, right? The startle response is necessary because it's sort of like, holy shit, I don't know what's happening here. I'm going to do this, right? If I look to the people around me and they're like, oh, it's okay, it's safe, this is fine, then my lid comes back on, right? If everybody around me starts to panic, then I also know that I should panic, okay? There's a lot of interaction in the development of anxiety that becomes really important to understand that we often, I think, really misattribute. There's also a piece of anxiety that is entirely, and importantly so, automatic. Anxiety is the protective piece that tells us something doesn't feel right in this experience, in this moment, and I need you to pay the utmost attention. I'm going to shut down everything else that you would have access to, like the PIN number to your bank card, the middle name of your mother-in-law, how to bake peanut butter cookies. None of that thing becomes important when there is danger in front of you, okay? Which makes a lot of sense, right? When danger's ahead of me, your brain just does this for you. I was talking to a bunch of RCMP officers this weekend and I was like, here's the thing. When I start to talk about how to manage anxiety, manage panic, manage when you're in a traumatic situation to get your brain back together, I'm doing that because you will never become soft. I never have to train you in being hypervigilant. That's in your bones. That's in your system. We are good at that part. What we're not good at is the regulating part. What we're not good at is how we come back home as a part of that, okay? So yes, in addition to, what we do, what we experience, it's also in addition to sort of like what's happening in our bodies, right? Is there a genetic component? Is there a hormonal component? Is there all of those kind of things, which we'll dive into in a little bit, okay? So anxiety is there to let us know about danger often before we can process it. So it becomes a problem when it thinks, and let's make anxiety the entity, okay? Let's make anxiety the external entity. Anxiety becomes a problem when it thinks there's a danger and there really isn't one. Okay. It works super good if it is interpreting the situation correctly. Okay. So, just the typical example, you and I are out frolicking and out of the bushes jumps a cougar. And typically speaking, you and I both know if we've been on this earth for very long, we can identify that as a cougar. This is not good. Okay. But I do not need to stay regulated in this moment. My body knows before I probably can even process it that this is a dangerous animal. It's going to flip. My world's going to start to go little and I need to fight or flight. Okay. And typically you shouldn't fight a cougar. Tip for free, I mean, if this wasn't already worth it, there you go. Don't fight a cougar. You should probably run, or you're probably not going to make it anyway, but I would, I don't know what the protocol is for cougars if you play dead, but I doubt that can't even climb a tree because they're good climbers. Anyway, this scenario is not good for anybody, really. But the idea is you don't need access to any of those things. Your body's going to do that, okay? Typically, when we start to talk about anxiety, what I like to think about the most is what resources are we starting to build in to question whether the body is trying to tell me whether there's real danger there or not. Because that's often where anxiety starts to mess us up, is that actually the body starts to go into a panic mode like there's a cougar, but we're just starting grade 6. Our friends are not talking to us. We might, not have gotten this job, or we might have said something stupid, or people might think we're this. Like all of those things are thoughts that become really big. All right. So oftentimes something has got stuck in the sense of danger, and the sharing of that information with us, likely because we haven't processed it fully, can be scary, traumatic, or anxiety-inducing situations that have happened to us, so we get stuck. So let me give you another example, okay? So if we are in this place where we get heightened about whatever, and we should be, right? We're starting a new school. I don't know if I'm going to be able to handle my life without, my mom at school today, or if I'm starting a new job, or whatever the deal is, or I have to go in public, right? I'm going to fail. People are going to make fun of me. Nobody's going to like me. What starts to happen is our thoughts keep us stuck in that flipped place. Our thoughts feed the anxiety, okay? And if we think about anxiety as an external entity, it often takes a system. The bigger it gets, the more profound it becomes, the more debilitating it becomes. It often takes a group effort to contain it, okay? Now, again, this is a spectrum, right? The normal response to anxiety makes so much sense to me. We can navigate this quite easily when we sort of get, we're anxious because we're getting on a roller coaster, right? We know why in those moments that our heart is racing. We can make a whole lot of sense about that. Okay, so I'm on a roller coaster. I'm about to probably die. Like all those things are happening. My heart should be beating fast. I should be losing my mind. My lid is half flipping. I can't even think straight. Holy shit, this was a bad idea. Blah, blah, blah. But the context tells me that I'm on a roller coaster and that's why it's happening. When those emotions start to happen and you don't have a reason for it, that's what panic looks like. That's what a panic attack looks like. Because if I'm just driving down the road, I'm theoretically safe in my car, or this is a good example often for police officers I talk about, it's you're filling up your car with gasoline. You're safe. As far as you know, right? You're safe. Everybody's safe. Everything is happening. You're just there. You're going to church on a Sunday. You're filling up your car with gasoline, and all of a sudden the heart starts to race. Is there a bad guy here? Is something happening? What is going on? Oh my God. Am I having a heart attack? Holy fuck. Where's my aspirin? I don't know. The thought starts to feed the body's response to we're in trouble here, right? oftentimes in therapy, what happens is we can unpack those things. And I mentioned police officers because oftentimes things get stuck when trauma happens a lot. We get stuck at the scene because we didn't have anywhere to put it after, right? And so I have a fascination and a love and a massive appreciation for first responders because there's been very little infrastructure built into the system that allows them to make sense of, to come down from, to put the smell of gasoline back in the place of that memory that it needs to stay, right? The smell of gasoline because you've just been at a major MVA and there was chaos and death and scariness all around. You should have been anxious in that situation. There should have been a heightened state of arousal. I didn't want you to be calm there. I wanted your body to be alert and engaged. You don't need to know the PIN number to your bank card or how to make peanut butter cookies. In that moment, you need access to the 3 things you know to be true: how to open an airway, how to save a guy, how to do the things. Okay, good. When I get out of that fearful place, I need a time to put my body back together. Bring it back home. What did it feel like to be there? I couldn't breathe. I could see somebody that needed me. I needed to do these things. And there was gas everywhere. I was just so scared things were going to start on fire. So the smell of gasoline there in that moment was so triggered or so connected to the idea of this panic. If I don't have somewhere to put that a little bit, if I don't sort of make sense of it and piece those things together in my prefrontal cortex so that it starts to then become a memory, not a heightened state, the next time I smell gasoline, it puts me back in that state. Okay? Does that make sense? So I think that this context of, the first day of school is scary, spiders are scary, all of those things in and of itself, it's really sort of benign things that tend to induce anxiety or panic, right? Because you should be anxious when it's a cougar, right? Generally speaking, cougars, unless you're at a zoo, should result in a heightened state, okay? But Christmas lights and the first day of school and all of those things, don't in and of themselves, or the sound of a radio, the sound of your alarm, the dinging. Listen, this is a very common one for all of us right now that we're not aware of. The notification on our emails. Data is phenomenal about this. The baby spike in cortisol that happens when you get an email notification. Almost you don't even register it. But if you work in an industry or an organization where an email means something typically like people are fucking mad, or the phone call rings, I talked about this with a group of homicide detectives where the only reason this particular phone would ring is somebody's dead. So you can imagine you start to pair that then when the phone rings, the body keeps the score and it goes like this, okay? So oftentimes what is our greatest fighter of anxiety is being able to put the context together so that the body then understands it doesn't need to get you ready for fighting. You are not back at that scene. Listen, anxiety is your friend. She's trying so hard because the gasoline is there. Holy shit! Block everything else out. We need you to be a hero in this moment. We need to keep you safe because we don't want you to die. Anxiety is not a bad thing, okay? But man, can it knock you out, okay? So there's been a significant and understandable conversation these days around kids and anxiety. So I'm going to take us through a bit of a developmental trajectory, but this applies for everybody, okay? For instance, in 2012, mental health statistics changed wildly. This little fella, John Haidt, taught me so much, and I put all of this in the resource list, okay? Taught me a lot about why this word anxiety seems to be more prevalent this day. So we've seen a 26% increase. I can't remember if I put this in here. Post-COVID, we've seen that go down a little bit. And we're like, what is going on? Are we in a mental health crisis? What is happening? What is the issue? And, given the new season of our podcast, I feel so strongly about this. I do not think we are in a mental health crisis. I think we are in an understandable human response to a loneliness epidemic. Full stop. because we have never been this disconnected in the history of the free world. One of the most critical responses to anxiety is connection and context. If you are surfing your phone, nothing, P.S., happens that's good on your phone in the dark, especially if you're under the age of 18, okay? Or that's an arbitrary number, but a kid, okay? The other thing that anxiety feeds off of is sleep deprivation. It loves it when you're tired. Holy moly, can you find all the shit that's not right when you're tired? Okay? And oftentimes anxiety fucks with our sleep. So it either makes us just want to shut down because we cannot handle anything, right? Which tends to be not entirely restful sleep, or there is not a chance nobody's letting mama go to sleep, okay? So it becomes really difficult. So if we look at the data in particular, this is to strengthen my argument, okay? So introduction of the smartphone, 2006, introduction of the forward-facing camera, 2009, 2010, okay? We've seen a massive, really recognizable decrease in the mental health of kids these days following the introduction of the smartphone. Now, initially, this didn't happen, of course, because we thought this was good. We thought that this was fantastic because, oh my God, I remember Asher was born in 2010. I had all the baby Einstein shit you can imagine, okay? We were super proud of him. At 2 years old, he was showing Baba how to move the thing on the phone. Huh? We were like, woo! Also, we thought smoking was good at one point. When we gather data to suggest there's something harmful about this, then we need to respond. And we're certainly in this era, in this moment, really caught between two worlds of like, oh my goodness, technological advances have allowed us to have access to so many things, so many people, so many ways to, expedite the process of learning and communication in this world, business development, all those things. It's also come with a massive cost that we're only just starting to unpack now. And what we know to be true is that when the forward-facing camera became prominent, we became very connected and overwhelmed with our own image, okay? Also, we have never had this much access to the opinions of others. I will tell you that it was about 2015 that everything started to noticeably change in the data, okay? So the first wave of the internet didn't mess us up. We found it exciting. Okay, but we became complicit in it, and the smartphone 2007, sorry, I got that wrong, forward-facing camera 2009. Why that's critical is that in this human race, there are two rules, okay? And this is the new soapbox that I sit on all the time these days, okay? Number one, whoever created us humans said there's two rules. Number one, we're neurobiologically wired for connection, okay? In our lifetime, you and me, okay? As many trips as we have left around this sun, we will not automate relationship. The new AI, I say this every single day of my career, probably till I die now, the new AI is authentic interaction. In fact, it's not the new one, it's the old one that is always proven to be true. But as we try to automate things and become much more chat GBT-ish, beautiful opportunities there. But the thing that will always matter is authentic interaction, because the number one rule of being human is we are neurobiologically wired for connection. You disconnect from an infant, they die. We will not automate relationship in this lifetime or many that come after us, because we need each other. Not only just to survive, but to become better, to learn how to regulate emotion, to learn how to make sense of the scary things, the anxiety-inducing things that happen to us. If we live in isolation, we got nobody to look at. Mom, is things okay? Dad, how do you handle this? Leader, what the fuck do you do when somebody fires you? How do you handle a complaint? We need scripts for that, and somebody has to walk us through that. The more disconnected we become, the harder, theoretically, and apparently in the data, it's going to become. The second rule of the human race is a curveball, okay? So despite the fact that we're neurobiologically wired for connection, rule number one, the second rule is the hardest thing we will ever do is look at each other. Whoever made us said, I'm going to make you all connected, but I'm going to make it tricky. Hardest thing you will ever do is look at each other. Now, people doubt this all the time. So anytime I'm doing a real talk, I say to people, not a real talk, but a live talk, I meant, make eye contact with somebody in this room. And it proves difficult. You know, Anand's research around the 4 minutes of connection is always really clear that it's difficult to sink into people for long periods of time. And what I think is more important, that's never changed, but what is more important is that in the last 2 generations, our proximity to each other has changed. Our ability to look at each other, our opportunities to look at each other have become more difficult. And one of the ways that I judge whether I need to be worried about something or anxious about something is I check with other humans. Either you watch babies, you know, this is so critically important when you meet a new person. I often say this to childcare workers, focus first always on primary caregiver. And we often do this when you see a new baby enter the room. They're cuter than their mom typically. And so or their father, a caregiver. So we go right to the baby, right? This baby who has very little in their prefrontal cortex. And we're like, oh, look at you. Holy fuck. They play strange. No, they're just scared. And if you go to mom first, dad, who's ever safe in their arms, it's nice to see you. I'm so grateful you're here. I can't wait to learn more about your baby. What's your favorite thing about them? You'll notice that the safety checking is there. If this guy thinks it's safe, then it must be. Because I need to depend on the responses of other people to help me navigate the world. You can understand that this is becoming more and more compromised because the allure of the algorithm has made it so easy to look away. To not turn your camera on because I look like shit, because I have to look at myself when I'm talking to you, and I know what you're going to have to see here. So, I mean, I had a meeting that this is what somebody said to me today. I don't want to turn my camera on because I don't want you to see me. You don't want to see me today. I do. I mean, I hope you're clothed, but I do want to see you. Like this is, I mean, we've often talked about doing these workshops where we can all see each other. Then it becomes confidentiality issues and all the things, but those are my favorite. Or I can do a virtual talk. I love to be able to have cameras on because, we need the feedback. I need to know if this is landing or isn't this landing, right? So this entire hour, I'm chatting to myself. And I'm thinking I'm good, but I have no idea. Like I generally, you know, I can see your comments. Thank you so much. But it's like, thanks, Kathy. See, Kathy's acknowledging it's landing and you are good. Kathy, you get a star. Now, if we take a look at like, is this a problem? Okay, so many kids suffer from anxiety. 5 to 19% of all kids and adolescents. So I don't know where they're grabbing these numbers from, but it's like 5 to 19%. So let's just say, I've also seen numbers like 1/4 of all kids will experience anxiety. All kids will experience anxiety, okay? If you have babies that are born a little bit more sensitive, if they're on the spectrum, if they have a sensory processing disorder, if they're super bright, if they have a learning disability, if they're not neurotypical, which is such a stupid word because so many of us these days, or all the days, are in a place where, you know, our bodies are wired differently. Too much noise gets us busy, all the things. The biggest issue I think we're facing right now is the fact that in order to help regulate emotion, we need big people to be regulated. We need leaders, we need parents, we need grandparents, we need teachers, police officers to be regulated. Us big people have never been this dysregulated because we are the first generation of parents with access to social media. We are so concerned, as is this guy, which, I mean, brilliant take on kids. My next book, I think, is going to be about why we're so lonely. And I think it's because those of us in this leader role, either as a parent or in organizations, have never been this overwhelmed. People have never had this much access to it. Our parents did not experience this. I didn't have a cell phone until I was in grad school, at least, maybe even my first job. This is so young. This is in its infancy. And we are not equipped for this much noise. We were not born where people could just email us anytime. We would come home from work at 5 o'clock. My father would come home from work at 5 o'clock. Nobody could get him. If you had a fight with somebody, you went to your house and sorted your shit out, maybe talked to somebody about it, or just let it sit in your body before you saw them the next day at school and try to navigate it or not. Right? Now I can fire a text to you before I even have time to process it, and I'm saying all kinds of asinine shit. What it takes for me to walk my babies home, more than anything, is my regulation. And it's never been more difficult for me to work on that because we charge our phones by our bed. Like, let me just take you through this real quick, okay? If what is required in teaching other people how to regulate emotion is to demonstrate it, right? If you think about the most regulated leader you've ever had, it is so much easier to serve, to work in a connected, regulated leader than it is in a disconnected, lid flippy, losing their mind human, okay? True of us parents. Now, please hear me when I say this. All of us parents will lose our minds. Our job is to become overwhelmed sometimes. Totally normal, okay? I'm talking about the capacity for those of us in this lifetime that have not yet considered the fact that we as parents wake up to our phones, okay? Generally speaking, the vast majority of us charge our phones by our beds. For good reason in many ways. We don't want to miss a call from our children. We want to stay connected. But also in very asinine ways because we can't fall asleep without our phone. We're checking in the middle of the night. We're scrolling until we fall asleep. We're watching Dateline, which is so relaxing. Huh? Some baby girl is going to the bar in Tallahassee by herself, and you're watching to see whether she dies. That's what's happening in your vision before you go to bed on the Dateline. And I love Craig Melvin. I love him. But it's not good for your anxiety. Anyway, so you wake up first thing in the morning, right? You're checking your email because you want to get ahead of the game. Nothing in there is going to be good. There is very rarely are you going to get an email that's going to make you go just drop your cortisol and take on the day. Nope. And then you're going to check social media. You're going to just see if whatever else everybody's doing, and you're going to be like, holy fuck, what a bitch. She's drinking collagen and this one's working out already. Huh? Cortisol like this, shoulders like this. Our parents didn't wake up like this. Now, I'm not saying that they didn't have their own issues or that there was nothing. This involvement in the system before you even step into your day is ridiculous. You strap on your watch, which suddenly then you have lots of input coming here that even if you miss your phone, don't you worry about it. All the Team Snap bitches are right here. Ba-ding, 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 ba-ding. And then you come out and your children have asinine questions like, what's for breakfast? And where's my agenda? Jesus, what do I look like to you? And then you go to work and you're listening to the radio, you're trying to listen to a podcast, you're trying to get your workout, and you're trying to do other things, better yourself. No silence. You sit in front of a computer, you hear constant notifications coming, right? Your parents can get you at any time. If you're lucky enough to have parents on this earth or not or whatever, we've never been this much inundated by noise. Sitting here, huh? My phone, which I meant to leave out, is sitting here, okay? So as I watch a notification come in, it catches my eye out of the corner. So I'm turning this around right now. I don't have my watch on, okay? But it becomes very difficult for us to not attend to that, which is why I'm a massive proponent of no cell phones in school, period. Even if it is still allowed to be in their backpack or their locker, they are not good enough to avoid the allure of the algorithm. This little box houses connection. And when we are wired for that, I cannot, as a 49-year-old woman, shut it off when I'm really trying to get to the end of Bosch's murder. I'm just so connected right now to a show called Bosch. He's the best homicide detective in the world. And I just want to know, like, is his daughter going to be okay? And it's 3:00 in the morning. I've got a massive day tomorrow, but I do not have it in me to shut the phone off. How can we expect somebody with a baby prefrontal cortex to make those decisions? We cannot. They are not that good. So there are take charge moments where I will say, No, not allowed, which is really where the education system is at in this moment. People say, is this a human rights violation? Fuck that. It is not. We thought once that smoking in schools was also okay. I don't know if that's really true, but I kind of make that up. We thought smoking in planes was good. It's not. We changed the rules. We're really in this place of trying to understand, I think, what is feeding anxiety and how we deal with it. So what we've known historically is that there is equal prevalence among boys and girls until adolescence, and then it rises significantly in females. I think that has much more to do, so 3-to-1 for females versus males. I think that has much more to do with the articulation of anxiety, because I can't assess and I can't diagnose something that you can't tell me about, okay? So it's easier, still to this day, those who identify as girls are easy to assess if they have much more of an emotional language. And statistically speaking, we still provide much more of an emotional language to our girls than we do our boys. So regardless, that the data would suggest that females experience anxiety more than males. And here's the big people data. Anxiety disorders are the world's most common mental disorders, affecting 301 million people. And that was back in 2019. So when we talk about it as a disorder, it means it is significantly affecting your functioning. Okay, so anxiety is normal. When it starts to really affect your way to the way you work, interacting with people, getting out of your home, engaging in relationships, when that starts to debilitate you significantly, that's when it becomes clinical. So I think that, what it is in the notes that I gave you, I was like, it's normal. It's not dangerous. Anxiety will not kill you. It does not have the capacity. Okay. It is an emotion. It can feel as though you're dying, which is sometimes why we get that mixed up. Okay. But it's just an emotion. And I often say this, anxiety and depression will not kill you. They do not have the physical capacity to get you, but not talking about it might, because you have to name it to tame it. So, but again, back to what it is, it's adaptive and we all experience it. So everyone can feel anxious sometimes, but people with anxiety disorders often experience fear and worry that is both intense and excessive. And I have to tell you, I've had multiple panic attacks in my life, I shouldn't say multiple. I think I can probably count them on my hands before I was treated. But my very first nocturnal panic attack happened in grad school, and I literally called my very good friend Heather Pike at 3:00 in the morning and said, I think I'm having a heart attack. I was training for a marathon at the time, half marathon at the time. I was so overwhelmed by school and conversations about where to do residency and all the things. And I woke up in the middle of the night, my hands were numb and I couldn't breathe and all the things were happening, right? And so I called her and we went to the hospital and I had an MRI or not an MRI. What do you call that? It's like EKG or something where they check on you. And I was not looking my best. And I was still single at the time. So, once my lid came back on, I was looking for a husband in the ER. And my friend Heather, God bless her, said, this is not your finest moment. But I do remember that the physician said to me, I think what you're experiencing is anxiety. And I was like, excuse me? I am getting my PhD in psychology. I know what anxiety is. You are making that up. I'm having a heart attack. He's like, all the indications would suggest that no, actually you are physically healthy. We just need it. And so here's the issue. It is very convincing when you are when your body thinks you are running for your life, to make you feel as though you are fixing to lose your life. So when we think about sort of the symptom presentation, I outlined some of this in your notes, but it's so tricky because there's something. Do you need something? I can't read through the door. Hurry up. Can I go to Cohen's till 8:30? Yes, be home at 8:30. We'll cut that. Where is your father? P.S. You want to see my lid flip? I'll show you. Anyway, okay. So behaviors are anxiety. Behaviors are like anger, sleep issues, overplanning, avoidance, numbing, irritability, negativity. As I was making these lists, and I was like, this is basically everything. Okay. So when your system gets overwhelmed, you start to feel things like embarrassed, ashamed, jealous, all the things. Okay. Insecure, grief, So, I mean, I put a list of behaviors there and symptoms there, but I just want to normalize that some of these things sort of happen big in our bodies. And when our babies have never been this particularly overwhelmed, these things start to happen. So it can show up like so many things, right? There's so many symptom profiles that are so easily discovered. My favorite these days is the less clinical consideration of where anxiety shows up in your body. Okay. So in this season of Unlonely, I just interviewed a beautiful woman named Dr. Nicole Kane, who I can't wait for that episode to come out. But I summarized a little bit of what I've learned from her in this talk today, because I think it's the cutting edge and sort of understanding a little bit deeper about, how anxiety shows up in your body. And so oftentimes, her book's called Panic Proof, and it doesn't come out till October, but it's this idea there. She suggests that we start with that critical question, not what's wrong with me, but what is my body trying to tell me? Not as what is wrong with me, but what is my body trying to tell me? And that is such a great question to even ask a kid who's in the middle of an anxious experience, or when you are feeling like overwhelmed because you can't go to work, it's just too much, or whatever the deal is. What's your body trying to tell you? And when you have a 15-year-old who doesn't want to talk about nothing, and all those things are happening, you can just say, I wonder what our body, what your body's trying to tell you right now. And it's this shift from what is wrong to what is my body trying to tell me. And the book is called Panic Proof. Okay. What I think is really cool about it is she goes on to consider breaking down your anxiety into where it shows up in your body mostly. Okay. So the gut, thought, did it happen from trauma? Is it in your chest? Is it in your nervous system, immune system? Does it take the form of depression? Is it a hormone caused, or is it based in anger? And I dug a little deeper just in the notes for you, just in case, you don't get a chance, but I found it so profound to think about that it starts to show up in our bodies in different ways. Like, she refers to these, I think it's 8 or maybe 9 types. Okay. So things like gut anxiety, butterflies in your stomach, gas, bloating, indigestion, pain, the gut anxiety, stomach discomfort a long times, when you're getting anxious. Does your appetite change? It just was interesting to me that some people experience it in different parts of their body. Thought anxiety. Do you just intrusive, persistent, obsessive thoughts, or do you get stuck in the loop? Okay. Much more connected to things like OCD for sure. But it's this idea that like right here, this is where it goes. If you've experienced trauma, your hypervigilance, is your life high pressure, she just makes some really great points. Depressive anxiety. Now, oftentimes, depression and anxiety are technically different conditions, but they often occur together. And my grad school advisor explained this to me way back, so 20 some years ago, and I never forgot it. Glenn Barry, you're amazing. Started with the idea that like it's on a continuum. Anxiety and depression is on a continuum. Anxiety is when you're feeling all the feelings and you just are overwhelmed with the amount of feelings, and it feels like there's so much to feel and I can't. If you stay stuck in anxiety long enough, it makes you tired and you get depressed. It doesn't happen for everybody, but it often is this continuum that we can see happen in many, many people, which makes sense to me. So if you struggle with feelings of anxiety primarily, but experience depressive undertones, it's sort of this concept of, really is the anxiety wearing on you. It's totally normal to sort of feel that sense of disheartenment when anxiety is high, but it occurs when depression becomes persistent and intense enough to interfere with your life. So then we sort of start to see how those two things are connected. She also talks about, in addition to gut anxiety, there's cardiac and nervous system anxiety, which sort of like is focusing on the different parts of your body, the tingling, the numbness, when we think about nervous system, or like, is it always in your chest? Anger anxiety, she described it as like when you're overwhelmed, do you ever feel irritated or annoyed? Which, everybody can say yes to. Okay. So some of these things, in my conversation with her, I was like, God, how do you delineate these things? And she's got the answer. But trauma anxiety makes a little bit more sense to me in terms of a continuum of the anxiety, which is really like, I get to this place where it's debilitating and my lid is stuck a lot. PTSD is sort of, for me, when you've experienced either once in a huge way or multiple times over things encoded in terror that you had no process to be able to put down, or regulate or reintegrate into your body, it gets stuck. So like big T's or little T's, massive events, or little T's like, gaslighting, legal issues, all the things that like keep us like this. And I would argue just like the constant inundation of the data that we have to process these days makes it quite difficult to navigate. Okay. The last thing she talks about is immune system anxiety. And so, I think oftentimes Gabor Mate talks a lot about the significant rise in immune disorders in women compared to speaking to men, and how so many of us hold us in our bodies. Okay. So, chronic fatigue, fibromyalgia, histamine intolerance, irritable bowel syndrome, all of those things, when push comes to shove, you feel like you're a big mystery. If you've tried a ton of different treatments, sometimes it really is to look at, what is my anxiety, or is my immune system often in a state of hyperarousal? So I really appreciated that conversation, and I wanted to bring you sort of some of that research and conversation today, because I think that, we talk about anxiety. I've talked about anxiety in a typical way for a very long time. But I think, what I really loved about her is that, can we have a little of all of them? Yes. Right. It doesn't necessarily mean that, you have to decide. This is attachment disorders often fall in the same category for me. Who gives a fuck what you have? If you have it, what do we need to do about it? But the idea is really, understand that there's a complexity of anxiety, and we use one word to encapsulate so many symptoms. And you can experience it very different than your friend, or than your sister, or than, somebody else in your world. And really understanding what my body is trying to tell me instead of what is wrong with me is really, I think, so critical in starting to tame anxiety, reassure it that, you can sort of understand a little bit more about, why at one point your body did need to let you know that there was danger coming. So when it becomes a problem, of course, is when it starts to significantly interfere with daily functioning. So school refusal, starting to mess up sleep, starting to, really the irritability becomes ridiculous, combative. When you start avoiding things like, spending time with friends or going to work, or, those kind of things are when we start to sort of give a clinical name to it. But I think that, what we can do about it as we kind of, wrap up this hour here is probably the thing that, I really want to focus on. The autonomic nervous system, sometimes called this like fight or flight system, is such a beautiful mechanism. It's responsible for controlling a host of bodily functions, so when we're deep in there, perspiration, blood pressure, heart rate, digestion, sexual response, all of those things are tucked right in there. It lets us know that we're dealing with a threat, but everything is so interconnected. Sometimes fight or flight system kicks in when we don't need it. That's it. That's the summary. And there's this beautiful article in 2017 when we were talking about in a journal called Chronic Stress. During intense anxiety or panic attacks, the logical part of your brain, called the prefrontal cortex, becomes less active, while the emotional brain, the limbic system, becomes overactive. Makes sense. That's exactly what I want you to do when there's a cougar. The brainstem joins the fray and produces flight or freeze symptoms like dizziness, shakiness, nausea, palpitations. And when this happens, you're telling yourself to relax. It doesn't always cut it. You can't just be like, relax. Your body's like, get fucked. I am gonna die. Particularly if there's no convincing. And so what I love the most, so if we want to start to talk about treatment, okay, this is where, for me, particularly people who struggle a lot in this place, trying to disconnect the thoughts and the behaviors when we get really into the CBT model, oftentimes what we miss is what the body's trying to tell us. Okay, so the body keeps the score. Now, I gave some anxiety management tips that actually work. That's what I call them. And so let's go through those real quick right now. So I think the thing that is so interesting to me is, number one, calm people, calm people. And when I'm thinking about creating a list of things, I'm going to talk about that in a second. Actually, the idea that is, this is also one of Nicole's, Dr. Kane's suggestions, but is to make a panic attack pack. Either for your child or for you. And what I want you to start to think about is really anxiety being a nervous system issue. And so, how do I get your nervous system? How do I start to convince anxiety or have conversations that indeed in this moment I am safe? You are safe. One of the quickest ways, of course, is to surround yourself with calm people. If you cannot access a regulating other, if you are by yourself, if you're at school and you're embarrassed, here is a couple of hacks that I really love. Your vasovagal at the back of your neck. I love this example that she gave in this little cold pack. And I would have done this for Asher when he was littler because he was such an anxious, our oldest guy. And she suggests a cold pack. So either putting a freezer pack in a lunch bag, packing it in your purse. She suggests, actually, I don't know if you've seen this, but like, like the heat packs, like when you're doing the skiing or something, you put the hot pockets in. They also have cold packs, so you can break up like this, and then they get cold. I don't know what kind of chemical thing is happening in there, but they're cold, and so you can use them to ice an injury or to do whatever. Okay. But what happens is you just placing that on your neck is the quickest way to bring your prefrontal cortex back down. Breathing and slowing that down on purpose. Nobody even really needs to see it. I've also seen people just put it on their cheeks, a cold compress on your cheeks. And if you have enough wherewithal to bring yourself back down in that moment or to teach your babies how to do that, it will bring you back really quick. And this is often true, when people get super anxious at the beginning of a big game, in hockey dressing rooms or any sports. I often talk about really getting that lid back on. And if I have somebody that's really flipping, really engaging, just gently in this process, because I think, there was a horrific practice back when I did a lot of consultation in foster care, that when kids were really getting out of control, they would put them in the shower. Institutionalized people's, hundreds of years ago, they would spray them down. Two very different approaches, okay? Because you shocking your system back into regulation doesn't teach you anything. Slowing it down in a gentle way, getting you back on track by really being clear, like, okay, I'm okay, come on back, can assist you in developing neural pathways that allow you then to have access to that if you don't have the ability to have a cold pack, okay? So also things like, I put this in here, but like just anything to sort of get you back into a place. Breathing through a straw, chewing ginger, gum even works for some kids, a rough stone and a smooth stone. Marty and I often talk about our favorite, that I know I've spoke about on these talks before, to use the word calm. And in your own head, if you're driving and you're having anxiety comes, or your baby's by themselves, or at nighttime, if I'm trying to get one of the kids to settle and they're just overwhelmed by something that happened that day, we go through calm, and we pick a category and we go through calm. Chocolate bars are the category. Give me a chocolate bar that starts with C. Give me a chocolate bar that starts with A. Give me a chocolate bar that starts with L. And sometimes it gets tricky, right? Does licorice count? Okay, we'll take an L for licorice tonight. Give me a chocolate bar that starts with M. Milky Way. Okay. And then if it's still heightened and I can see that in their body, then we'll start with animals. We'll go to animals. Do animals. Give me a C. Cheetah. Give me an A. Ant. And you can go through that again and again and again. And often, what we're trying to do is get the prefrontal cortex back online. So when you start to think about things, I don't want you to avoid the issue about what your body's trying to tell you. You can process that later. But the first name of the game, right, is to get that prefrontal cortex back on. And then we start to talk about, I noticed when it is the beginning of gym that you get super anxious about this, or this seems to kick in every time in November. This seems to be a problem, whatever that is. We start to sort of wonder, and we may never get it, but we start to wonder a little bit about what the body's trying to tell us. And that just sort of starts to give us a little bit more power. And it starts to give anxiety the permission to shrink. I often talk directly to anxiety in people's bodies in my office. And this is sounding, this might sound a little bit weird, but I often, sort of ask this question, where do you feel it in your body? Similar to Dr. Nicole Kane's sort of conversations about, where do you feel it? And so many times it's like, there's a big lump in my chest, or it feels like a great big rock that's metal and it's mad. And I love it when people can sort of describe those things to me, and I'll say, okay, let's just give it permission to be there. No, but I hate it. I don't want to get close to it. I fucking hate it. I want it out of my body. I bet you do. But for this moment, let's just give it full permission to be there. It's trying to tell us something. Welcome. It's okay. You're safe. You could stay as long as you want. I want to learn from you. And it seems asinine to have that conversation with your own body or your own system. But what becomes so cool about it, right, is then you can watch the shift happen. You can feel the shift happen even in your own body. Okay. So practicing reconnection skills, I think that was number 3 that I gave you on your list here. So relaxing from the head to toe. Oftentimes this is what, also in EMDR work, really getting you back into your calm space or your safe space, doing the white light exercise, which I really adore. Even in my own session, I'll start with anybody, that I just really need to bring back home. Just consider that a light is entering, in the top of your head, or that there's sand or water that's being poured through you. And I just want you to notice where there's a hitches, and just give it permission to go and pay attention to those things, right? Can it come out your fingertips and your toes, and just notice what happens. And we very rarely get into this state of relaxation because we have so much stuff, so much noise. So doing that on purpose, this is Eastern, practices that have been wise beyond any Western philosophical practices, which is really, the idea of meditation, of calming the body on purpose, of giving it a break from the noise. And so if meditation is too much for you, which I've often sort of responded in this place around like, I don't have time for the woo-woo shit. I don't want to be lighting fucking incense and all this stuff. I am a closet woo-wooer because there is nothing more powerful than taking control of your own body, right? Through movement, through breathing, through sound. That becomes so critically important. And I think that, it's interesting. I wanted to read you this little piece from John Hates because this is The Anxious Generation. So this book is also in your resources. He said, it matters what we expose ourselves to. On this, the ancients universally agree. This is what Buddha says. We are what we think. All that we are arises with our thoughts. And here's Marcus Aurelius. The things you think about determine the quality of your mind. Your soul takes on the color of your thoughts. So he says, in a phone-based life, we are exposed to an extraordinary amount of content, much of it chosen by algorithms and pushed to us via notifications that interrupt whatever we were doing. It's too much. And a lot of it pulls us downward on the divinity dimension. He's talking about, the spirituality, the sense of safety and calmness in our bodies. If we want to spend most of our lives above zero on that dimension, we need to take back control of our inputs. We need to take back control of our lives. And I really love this conversation about, being able to do work on purpose where you drive home with in silence 1 day a week from work. You make it a practice of being still, right? Just set a timer for 30 seconds and let the noise bubble around you, but you get that break. Charge your phone outside your room. I still struggle with this one all the time because I just also feel like I want to watch my show or I want to, whatever the deal is, right? But we can make as many excuses as we want. If we really want to continue to operate in that way, okay, there will be a cost to it. You get to make that choice. So developing a routine that is maintained as much as possible on the weekends, all of those things, so sort of our body knows what to expect from us, is Is numbness an expression of anxiety or depression? How do you help someone reconnect with emotion? That's a good question, Kim. I'm going to get to that in a minute. Okay. Creating a village also. Okay, so in point to sort of even, what Buddha talks about in this quote is really this idea that like who you surround yourself really matters with. We spend more waking hours at work than we tend to do at home these days. And so being very careful about fostering those relationships become important. Who are your best friends? Who are your teachers, your coaches, the grandparents, the best friends' moms? How are we really sort of fostering that sense of, am I connected to the people who my kids spend the most time with? Can I be? Should I be? Is there a possibility of creating that even more? Checking in and on and with, using the terms that we all understand, not pushing too hard to make kids do things, but collect and then direct. It doesn't mean everything goes, right? Futility is critical. Being anxious is critical. Experiencing disappointment, bullying, a loss of connection, getting fired from your job, getting your heart broken, all of those things I want desperately for your children to experience. I just want somebody available to walk them through it. Okay, because there's a lot of conversations about like this new generation is too soft. I would agree. Not because there's something wrong with them, but because us big people have not been available, particularly in the last decade, to walk them through hard things. We've lost proximity to our children. So the last thing I'll talk about in here is, John's work is irrefutable. Watch screen time. If you can help it, no screens in the bedroom, particularly overnight. The rules are so hard to set, but no screens in classrooms. Like if anybody ever wants me to talk to their superintendent, hook me up. I'm so happy. You can't take your phone to school, to sports. Like, no. And I'm guilty of this. Asher and I had this like big deal, about, his phone and at 14 and what does this mean? And oh my God. And I'm the problem because I don't pay close enough attention. Okay? I'm the problem. So manage this as best you can. No social media. And so John says this, no social media until 16 years old has been the ultimate rule that has been discussed so exponentially in our lives. And the horse is out of the barn. I mean, my babies have had access to YouTube and social media since they were babies. Many of us didn't know the ramifications, and now that we do, it's very hard to pull that back. It's very hard because that's how kids fit in, that's how they communicate, that's how all of this happens, right? Okay, so Angela, I'm just going to jump to this question real quick because I think it's important. How do you combat no screens in the classroom when most schools use Chromebooks exclusively to do their work? There's a very different conversation around screens than there is computers. Okay. What concerns me the most about these is the inundation of data, the accessibility to Snapchat, to Instagram, to those things that pull me, TikTok, that fill my soul with all of the things that I should be doing, could be doing. I'm not good enough around. Okay. When we use a Chromebook to be able to do research, to be able to be fluent in typing and to do those things, I think that becomes the issue that's so critical. And so people are like, I've heard this argument too, well, kids need their phones to do their work. No, they don't. I would much rather you provide a Chromebook where there is no access or very limited access, to Google searches, but there is no Snapchat notifications. There is no capacity for TikTok. So that's really difficult, or very different for me, right? That screens, when I'm speaking about screen time, I'm much more concerned about what happens when we're drawn in by the algorithm. Because what is so critical to understand, you guys, is that in social media is not social. It is so brilliant, so brilliantly designed, and the intention was good. How do we offer you access to such beautiful information so quickly? And we love it, yeah? But now each of us curate our own social media based on algorithms, okay, that are very much created by massive tech companies that identify where you spend your most time. Are you mostly looking at cat videos? You get more cat videos. I would not be interested I would not stay very long on my husband's algorithm because you know what's there? Cows, feeding cows, the proper salt ration, golf clubs. I could give a fuck about those things. So I would put that away. Guess what's on mine? Everything I love. Because I've liked this person, I've followed this person. I'm so interested in what just happened in the US debate. I'm a massive sports fan. I've got all the sports things. Right now I have everybody on the Today Show. I'm so interested in how that process works. I am very much Googling nutrition for menopausal women. Erin would spend exactly 0.7 seconds on my social media because the algorithm is intended to keep us there brilliantly, right? I'm not even mad about it. I think it's like the most brilliant business move of all time. But we now understand how and why this is set up, and our job is to be able to take some of that power back. And it's going to be fucking hard because the allure of the algorithm is strong. Okay. But my point is also in this space that like the social media is not social because you very much are curated into the things that you only believe. I don't follow people that I asininely disagree with. I don't. We block, we bless, we do this. I get it, but you know what it does is that it doesn't expose us to other ways of thinking. And we become very narrow-minded in our beliefs. Now, I'm not saying that you support people who are anti everything that is morally right and valuable to you. But when I don't understand the arguments on the other side of the table or from other political regimes or, what happens in different countries, because I just don't really want to see, mass war and murder, I can take that away. And I then become poorly educated in what is happening around me. Now, that's your prerogative, right? But then it becomes very difficult to have a educated opinion to assist people in navigating, when you hear one side of the story and, you make standing arguments around, this person is racist or we should defund the police or, Trump is the best or whatever the deal is, it becomes very difficult to question that. Okay. All right. So just to wrap up, and then Janice, I'm going to answer your question. I did put a little note in there about when to consider a medication consult for you or me. I'm a massive fan of medication consultations, not because I think that medication is necessary all the time. In fact, it's the last line of defense. Once we've started to sort of focus on how we can gain control back here. Some of us lose access to our behavioral interventions or our strategies when the neurotransmitters become too strong. So I often say, never hesitate to consult with a learned professional around, when medication might be helpful. And that's not a psychologist. That's always your medical doctor, your psychiatrist. And usually in then conjunction with a therapist to be able to sort of implement some of those strategies when we have access to it. Sometimes I've seen kids and often adults, including myself, where your lid becomes too flipped. For me in the postpartum phase, it didn't matter. All the strategies were really unreachable because the anxiety was too big. And so oftentimes, either temporarily or lifelong, what medication can do when it's really helpful is that it quiets that prefrontal cortex. It kind of slams it back on a little bit so that you can use some of your strategies. And then for some people, you can then start to take some of that medication away because you have the ability to do it on your own. And for other people, there is just such a chemical component involved in that it's dumb to move that away because we have the capacity to, in this medical model, be able to figure how we do that. So, use it when it's necessary. But of course, that's, a conversation for your physician. Yes. Okay. So books I put there for you, Anxious Generation, Kids These Days. Hello, I wrote that one. And Panic Proof. And I also have got a course or two that I put in there that if you want some more time to dive into some of these things, she's all yours. So, okay, I'm going to just, you texted me a question, Marty. Okay, excellent. Look at her. She got all the questions for me. All right, I'm going to just go through some of those. Thank you so much. All right. So we got 15 minutes for questions. Let's dive in. Number one, how will cell phones being banned in school help anxiety? Beautiful question. Okay. So again, as we talked about today, the allure of the algorithm, it means that my attention becomes significantly taken away. There's the four things that kids these days have on their plates that we have never seen kids have to deal with, and I'm going to just take them to three, okay? Because we'll talk about addiction maybe on another talk, but the idea is kids have never been this sleep deprived, okay? And sleep is probably the greatest predictor of mental wellness. Okay, my number one question when I'm doing an assessment with anybody is, how is your sleep? Greatest predictor. And we've never been this sleep deprived in the history of the free world because we allow phones in the bedroom. We are watching things to the middle of the night. Like all those things are happening. Yeah. And it's so easy because, when you consider this, if you've ever seen a toddler miss a nap, they're assholery-ish. And so are we. So are your children. Yeah. So it's the idea that kids are sleep deprived. They're socially deprived. So social deprivation means I'm not, just going out and playing on the street. I'm not doing these things. I'm spending much more time on my screen, which means I'm not developing the back and forth conversation about like how to navigate when you piss me off or when you break my heart or like all of these kind of things. Okay. And then the third thing that we talk about that is really different is the attention fragmentation that comes with that, right? So it becomes really difficult to stay focused on the things that I need you to learn that I don't really want to learn, when it's much more alluring that I'm getting a Snapchat notification. I'm getting taken away by being distracted. I would much rather sink into my phone that is something more sexy than, trying to learn chemistry. And so removing that distraction becomes a big people job, because if we leave it to little people, many people do not have the capacity. Okay. That's number one. Number two, my daughter is 7 years old and for the last couple of months has been struggling with a guilty conscience. She worries to the extreme about everything. The other night, I think she asked me 150 times if something she did was okay, or if she was mean when she did something, or if she should have done something differently. I'm hoping it is a confidence issue, but it seems to be overtaking a lot of her day and I'm not sure what to do. Any suggestions would be helpful. Okay, so generally speaking, not knowing your daughter specifically, at 7 years old, there's a lot of big noise that is happening when you start school. There's a lot of things trying to go on in my body about like, what does the world mean? Is God real? Will you die? Typically in that sort of pre-adolescent phase, and the exposure that kids get to many things these days means those questions will bubble up a lot. Oftentimes what happens is really, we try to reassure, but as you said, 150 times the reassurance isn't working, right? Some of the things that are really critical, right, is first of all, getting her out of the spin. And some of those things that, we talked about tonight, calm people. Let's introduce some of the calm strategies. Let's relax the body a little bit, and then we'll get back to your questions, okay? Really garnering some control back into the system about, I'm in charge of this. And sometimes our thoughts are just thoughts. I often get kids to do this experiment where I say, and adults too, like, just think of, to show you the power of your thoughts. Okay. Think about, I want you to close your eyes and I want you to think about a lemon. Okay. So you're standing in your kitchen. You have a big, ripe, juicy lemon there, and you're going to take a knife and you're going to cut into that big juicy lemon, and there's going to be stuff dripping all over the place. Okay, now I want you to pick up that lemon and you're going to bite into it, and juice is going to just drip down, right? What do you feel like in your body? And oftentimes we'll start to salivate, we'll feel the sour, like that will happen. And we can say, listen, sweetheart, there was not even a lemon in this room. Look how powerful our thoughts can be. Just by thinking about something, it changes the way our bodies feel. And so when we start to get stuck on something, worried about something, even if mommy tells you that it's not right, even if you check 400 times and it's not right, none of that's going to work. So part of our job is to beat anxiety, to beat it, because that's what it is. That's anxiety kind of pushing us around. And we're going to just kind of push back a little bit. Sometimes externalizing the anxiety, giving it a name. Oh goodness, is Meredith showing up again? Or is Asher's name, I'm sure he won't mind me sharing, his anxiety was the worry bitch. And it was super cool because at whatever he was, 9, I think, when we started this, or 8, he could say the word bitch. And that was so fun and really got him back into a state of regulation. That worry, bitch. I'm like, I know. What's she saying today? Well, she's saying that, everybody thinks that I'm dumb, and what if I never find my people? And like, Asher was really concerned a long time about, big time about whether, like the world was coming to an end, and how would we know if people, and then when COVID came, like, what if it seeps down into our vents and gets us that way? Like, is this Armageddon? Like all these things that you're like, how do you even, what is going on? And so just really sort of connecting the fact that big thoughts need somewhere to go. And we often panic when kids get really creative and innovative in their thinking about, like, death and is there a God? And Evan and I had lots of conversations about God. We started reading, there was a question, should we read the Bible? Should we, what about conversations with God? Should we talk about those things? And I mean, we don't spend a whole lot of time practicing any religion these days, but there's a spiritual discussion that happens quite often. And so it's like, okay, so let's figure out what that means to you. And do you want to believe? And what is it? It's exhausting. This is the point of anxiety, is that it's fucking exhausting. Which is normal. Okay. Physical illness is killers. How do I distract from the anxiety, fear of the unknown? Okay, so I'm wondering about this question, but I think what you're asking is, like, when there are physical symptoms in my body, how do I differentiate between, what is really physical and what is anxiety? And oftentimes, if you've got a cancer diagnosis, if you have, for example, right, or you've had a condition that might return at all, right? Like, there's people often say this with significant illness, right? There's life before it and life after it, because, the innocence is gone. And that's so true. And I think that a lot of times what I need to trust is that my body, when there's something physically wrong, it will persist. And in anxiety, when I can close it, if I can have some control over it, in some capacity, right? With the cold pack, with the calm, with all those kind of things, then I know that she's anxiety, and I can sort of, pull her a little bit closer to me and use her as, my friend. I know this is scary that we have this in our body. I know this is scary that, this is happening to us, but we have the capacity to hang on here. So it's I think that internal dialogue, building your village around you, that can kind of help in this. I'm only looking at my phone because Marty's sending me the questions here. Okay. What to do when a child is hyperactive and acts out in school because of anxiety. Also, when anxiety is related to attachment disorder. Okay, so 2 very different things. So what to do when a child is hyperactive and acts out in school because of anxiety. I want to start to create a system advocating for that particular child, having conversations with educators. Context is the prerequisite for empathy. Okay. Understanding what is going on in that child's world, in their body, what is maybe making them super anxious. Whether it's a chemical issue, or there's, they're going through, I don't know, I'm just making this shit up here, but like they're in the middle of, mom and dad are in a divorce, or they've got ADHD that's untreated, or like something's happening. And I would just be able to say, like, okay, this dude is super anxious, and here's why I know this to be true. How that manifests in his body is he's a super busy guy. So is there anything I can do to help you to sort of get him more regulated at the beginning every day? Here's some of the things that happen at home. I know it's really difficult. Thank you so much for being his teacher. It's like regulating and then making a plan universally on how, we can assist as a team to get his anxiety back where it needs to be. Okay, because you can't do that alone. Creating a compact for them when they are in a regulated state, and talking about that so that they can have some autonomy over their own symptoms, but also then getting the big people involved to help them when they can't do that themselves. Also, when anxiety is related to attachment disorder. So I'd be more interested in the contribution of trauma if we're talking about an attachment disorder. And that would really require, I would suggest, getting the school counselor involved, talking about, sometimes when trauma becomes too big in the body, it's so much more than just anxiety. It is a neural response that, takes a lot of understanding of the people around them. And oftentimes when we provide that context, as much as we know to be true, it assists other people in accessing empathy and really being able to sink in instead of just considering this kid as bad or not making good choices or not complying. Okay. If parents have anxiety issues, is it harmful to share feelings in the moment? When my daughter struggles, I struggle. Honesty is overflowing in our house. However, sometimes my daughter tells me it's not helpful to let her know I struggle too. Okay. Well, I think this is beautiful because you're having this conversation with her. And I wouldn't have this conversation when you're both in a heightened state. I would have this conversation when you're both regulated and be like, okay, let's make a plan here, you and me as a team, okay? Because I got some of it, you got some of it, we all got some of it. And listen, anxiety is highly genetically transferable. So sometimes we have a lot of that in our systems. And so just really having that conversation around, is it ever helpful to know what I'm experiencing too? Is it ever helpful to, to be able to do this? And I think, I think that's the critical piece, Angela, that, I love your question because it is really, oftentimes we use our kids as sounding boards or, we're trying to align by being like, mommy feels like this too. Right. And then the kids are like, what the fuck? Nobody's in charge here. So it's really like, if she's giving you that feedback, I'd be like, what's that like to hear, that I struggle sometimes too, or, when is a safe time for us to talk about this stuff? Is sometimes really an important question to ask, especially if she's so good at already giving you that feedback. Any advice when meditation itself seems to create some anxiety because of the focus inwards and increased awareness of body and sensation? Yes, I love that question. So my very limited understanding of meditation and being able to sort of focus inward as a scary place means I would really pair that with relaxation to the best of your capacity. Start low, go slow. I'm just going to do this for 30 seconds. And I need to tell your body that you are safe in this moment. This is a healing thing for you. And oftentimes none of us slow down long enough to feel it. We're scared of the quiet. We sleep with the TV on, with a sound machine, with a CPAP, with a fucking bathroom fan on, and 87 other things because we want it to numb the stuff. And we just don't want to hear it or feel it. And I mean, also you could be a light sleeper and you wake up easily. So don't worry if that's what you're doing. But I think just pay close attention to being still on purpose and really reassuring your body that it's safe in that moment. Give it 20 seconds. You did it. We did it. It's safe in this vessel that I get to carry around with me every single day. Okay. Okay. Is there screen time limit for kids that can reduce anxiety? Great question, Janice. He makes lots of suggestions here around screen time limits. And, basically I think there's no one prescription. I'll tell you what we started to do after I read this book. This summer, the kids were so mad. They were like, we hate Jonathan Haidt. And mostly because we've decided in our house to do, this took a lot of negotiation, but 2 days a week screen free, which means that mom and dad are supposed to comply and we try to do our best, but we've agreed that there's some leeway if I have to do this or if I have to prepare for a talk or whatever. But 2 days a week for a 24-hour period, phones, iPads, unless there's schoolwork that's required, goes in the drawer. And it's just been an experiment to sort of see what happens in those 2 days. And today's a screen-free day. As you heard during this talk, our youngest was, he's going to go try to find somebody to play with. And it is easier not to. And I think that, that's sort of the trick right now. So I think that, as much as you can provide other opportunities, do it. Anxiety increased through COVID, I think, because we had no control. We can't control the people adult children struggle to accept. Is this the case for many? Yeah. Yeah, we saw that rapid insight because, like, as a globe, it was so debilitating, which means we also incapacitated many of the walkers, the people who were regulated, because we were all dysregulated too. And now that's the ramifications of that is still being seen in organizational stress because so many people doing human services work are fucking exhausted, which means those of us serving humans makes it really difficult for those humans to be served well because we're all like this. Okay, so I would agree 100%. How to talk to your kid about their anxiety diagnosis and starting medication. Yeah, great question, T. I think that what I would do is pick where you play. Um, Oftentimes, I would do that in a regulated time. I would get a snack, maybe go for a drive, and do it in a place where it's safe. And you may need to return a few hundred times to that conversation, but I would go low and go slow. And if it's really difficult to have that conversation face to face, you can write a note. You can say, if you have any questions, I want you to give it to me, right? And I think that's the kicker. That's the kicker. Okay, guys, it's time. Humans, it's time. We're going to wrap up for tonight, but I so appreciated your questions. I really, really love how interactive the chat was tonight. This is like one of my favorite talks of all time. So, you get a 7-day rewatch, but the link will not be up for an hour. So don't panic. Don't worry. It will appear in your email, as everything else does. Share these workshops far and wide if you can. I love to do them, and I love to spend an evening with you. The next one is October 21st. Tickets are already live for that one. We're going to talk about making friends and keeping friends and when to cut some loose. In line with this sort of experience of loneliness, adult friendships have become difficult, maybe. And the necessity of human connection and building solid friendships has become, I think, really a problem when we are trying to understand how to stay connected to people. Your time is so sacred. You are so important. Who you surround yourself with has never been more important. So if you can join us on October 21st, please do. And you also get a 7-day rewatch and with all of that stuff. So I'm super excited about that one coming up. And then we got some more coming down the line, but it's all in there. And then I get to hang out with you once a month. And we've also talked about this. If you want to use this as PD for your schools, for your police departments, you can get credits because I am a registered clinical psychologist. There's often opportunities to get that. So we'd love to chat to you more about that if that would be helpful as a group for your teams, because these are some of my favorite nights. So thanks for being here. You are so great. Yeah, thanks, Jill. I know you gave me that idea. Be it so good to see you, Marie. I love this community. So stay tuned for another exciting week around here. And I can't wait to see you right back here next month if you're free. Good night, everybody.